Deadlift New Year's Resolution 2015, what I learned last year in 2014 about my deadlift. I'm going to go over in this video 6 tips or 6 ideas or 6 things on my notes here about what I learned last year and how I'm going to get better this coming year of 2015 to hit some PRs, but also share some of my ideas to maybe you can learn from my journey. So number one, the first thing is that in my first powerlifting meet, I did a full meet and I was able to deadlift 545 as a PR. Several months later, I was able to do again a full meet again where I was able to deadlift 551. So a 6-pound PR. And then I did a deadlift only meet in August and was able to pull 573. So some pretty consistent numbers with getting stronger. And the one thing I learned when it comes to getting stronger and building strength is that I find that as my PR or as my top strength gets better, my bottom strength gets weaker. And what I mean by that is that the rep work, because the thing is that I find out, I'll kind of abbreviate this, is that the rep work is really important, because what I found is when I deadlifted 573, I could not do 500 pounds for 5 reps. And right now, in fact, I don't think I can do 500 pounds for 5 reps. Right. I'm not even sure. I think I can. I'm not sure. So it's understanding that, you know, when you're training for pure specificity for a meet, for pure, almost like very specific technique driven, you can get a very high number. But the problem is not being able to make that kind of base where your rep PRs are closer to your max PRs. Will find you bottlenecking and hitting plateaus much sooner. I hope that makes sense. Maybe I'll elaborate on these next 5 things. Define your competition technique. One of my major breakthroughs in my powerlifting meet, I think it was in August of last year, was that I saw this video of Omar Isuf with Jeremy Hamilton talking about the rounded back deadlift, and this was actually a really big sort of eye-opener. And what it did was save me roughly about maybe 1.5 to 2 inches of range of motion. Because one of the things I've noticed, and I'll talk about this right now, which will kind of tie into the next thing, is that the lats, look, I try to pull with a neutral spine. I really try to get a neutral back as best I can. I try to fully retract my shoulder blades. They don't ever get fully retracted because the weight's too heavy, but I always try to start there. I always get as close as I can. But because of the belt and because of position, I get out of it. But I try to hold it. And I can hold it pretty good up until around the high 400s, like 485, 490. Because then after 480, 490, what ends up happening is my shoulders start to pull forward. And it depends on how fast I pull off the ground, but my shoulders will round forward as I pull it off the ground. And it's not really intended, but it's just kind of what happens versus starting rounded first. Because if you start rounded, you don't get pulled rounded, if that makes any sense. Or I guess if you start rounded, you might round a little bit more. So define your competition technique, the way you're going to lift, so that way you can practice that specific technique up for a peaking cycle. Number 3, big air versus lat speed. Okay, so taking a big deep breath of air versus pulling hard. Well, I think even though these are completely different things, is understanding that the big air, taking that breath and getting that pressure in your belt, what I've found is great and helpful when you're grinding. But if you've seen a lot of my lifts, I'm not much of a grinder. I don't grind many of my lifts. It's either I make it or I don't. And part of that's because I use basically technique and I guess ways of cheating. I guess you can call it cheating. I'm just trying to optimize my technique, because if at all my technique fails at 95, 100% on my 1 repetition max, I'm just not going to make the lift. Whereas if you are really strong and you practice grinding, you're going to be able to deal with it. But what I really wanted to talk about is that when you don't start round, what I learned for this third point I want to make is that when I started pulling the bar off the ground really fast and really making 450, 475, 480 quote unquote light, I found that depending on the day, if I deadlifted twice in that week or even 3 times, my lats, maybe the long head of my tricep would get really sore, and it felt weird, and I thought it was going to give me problems, and it did concern me for a bit, because the volume at the time I was training too much. My volume was a little bit too high. But that lat speed will cause your shoulders to get pulled forward. So if you start off with your upper back rounded, it helps prevent that pull. And I guess what I'm trying to say with this third piece is that when you pull the bar off the ground and you're not sure of how your technique is, especially in the high 400s, at least with my experience, is that pulling forward motion, you'll feel your lat stressed a ton, and that can possibly lead to a strain of some kind, a shoulder strain, maybe a rear delt strain, but I'm not sure. I've never had that before, but that was just sort of a thought. That was kind of a muddy one. Number 4, fast pull versus slow pull, and this is tying into everything that I just talked about, is that timing is everything for a fast pull. Slow pull is basically pure strength and grind. And again, the slow pull would be someone like man, what's his name? Hawthorne, Richard Hawthorne. You know, freaking strong, freakishly strong, able to maximize his leverage and just almost grind it off the ground. It's a purely smooth lift. And then you got someone who's extremely explosive, like Pete Rubish, right? He explodes it off the ground and then has to grind lockout sometimes. And timing is everything with the fast pull, as I mentioned earlier. So I guess I really kind of mentioned that, because then with the timing part is that if you can sort of get a running start, and this is my viewpoint, if you get a running start on the bar and you can really get speed off the bar, if you are able to keep your hips in the right spot as you break the ground or as you pass your knees, what will end up happening is you'll get the right leverage point as you pass your knees to make sure your hips stay back. Whereas with the slow pull, you're able to stay more accurate. And kind of the last part of last year, I was trying to determine what style I wanted. Do I want to do the fast pull or do I want to do the slow pull? And ultimately, they sort of kind of meld together, because I started pulling slow. I was able to pull 500 off the ground very slow, and it was kind of cool. I was like, wow, that doesn't seem that hard. But the problem is I can't do that many times. Whereas if I pulled fast, I could do more. It depends, though, because the problem is the slow pull allows for better accuracy with the hips relation to the shoulders and the bar, whereas the fast pull allows for a running start. You know, if you've ever kind of just take a rep, just bench press as an example, 185 pounds, trying to bench press 185 pounds, you know, for a 10-second rep versus a 2-second rep is a lot different. And that's kind of the idea here. And people will argue which is better. I think they're both important in learning. You know, again, I'm about a year. This is my first year. Last year, 2014 was my first meet. And, you know, I've only been in powerlifting for about a year. So keep that in mind. So I'm just learning, and this is my perspective. Number 5, you don't have to train heavy very often to build your strength, or to build your strength on the deadlift. If anything, it's just fun to do, and if you enjoy it and you love picking heavy shit, that's what you'll do. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, because I've done that, and I've done that a lot, especially at the end of 2013. But what I found is that sorry, I got a message. I have to get a baby bottle. Gotta hurry up here. What I found is that if you really focus on building your squat, and you squat and you focus on your rep work for the deadlift, you're going to be able to deadlift a lot of weight. And I say this because the squat's going to build leg strength, and squats by nature, you're going to be able to do a lot more reps and get more kind of overall body strength built. And with the rep work will help you refine your technique. So you're working at under 90%, 85%, 80%. You're still able to work on technique. And a lot of the time, you only need to lift heavy if you're having sort of a mental block. And that's kind of where lifting heavy deadlifts really come into play, because that's really what helps. It's just sort of having that, you know, like before my first powerlifting meet, when I was opening at like, I think 500, which was kind of too high of an opening. But, you know, it's my first powerlifting meet, and I don't even know if I could lift that weight, you know. And then what I had to do was I went back to some of my YouTube videos, and one thing I'll mention, I've pretty much recorded almost every single workout I've ever done in this entire like 13-14 months. So so if you want to see how I was like 6 months ago, you get an idea versus how I am now. But what I want to say is that, man, I just lost my train of thought. Oh, is that I had to watch my video of me deadlifting 525. It's like, oh, wow, that was easy. I should be able to get this. So it's kind of like, you know, a lot of the time it's more of a mind game. You know, you got to be able to get over it. Someone mentioned in a previous video I talked about that. He said that, you know, when he loads the bar for deadlifts, he gets you know, makes him nervous. And that's how I feel about squats. And I don't really feel that way about deadlifts for whatever reason, because I kind of honed my technique. I've built a lot of confidence in it. But just understand that you don't have to train heavy all the time. You just need to work on near max, like, you know, 80%, not super heavy, 75 to 85%, and work on reps and work on timing, or work on the technique. And then you test your max every so often, whether it be on the platform or maybe every 12 weeks, however, whatever training cycles you want to follow. But I think that if you're having trouble like being confident, one of the things I recommended to someone that asked me about someone that this guy, a CrossFitter, I think a regional athlete, his name is Mike, he was talking about how, he said, man, I need help. You got to teach me how to deadlift because this guy's super strong. He can squat 440. I can't even imagine squatting 440 right now. And he could, I saw him squat 440, and I think he did it without a belt. That was crazy. And then he did a second, he did one rep, and then he did it with a belt for the second rep, you know? And I mean, this guy's like 100 and I think 80 pounds, and he's freaking jacked and ripped. Anyways, I just told him, you know, one of the things that helped me, I can't imagine you not being able to pull 500. This guy's super strong, is that you just take something that's kind of in your kind of mental wheelhouse for what you know you can get pretty much for like a 5 rep max or for 4 reps. Like what's a max heavy 4 reps is your best 4 reps or best 5 reps, and just do that for lots of doubles or lots of doubles, or maybe better yet, take your lots of doubles or even lots of singles, because what that will do is it will help you build confidence, and it will also help you build accuracy at that specific weight. And number 6, which I'll end with because the video is getting a little long, is that block pulls versus deficit deadlifts. Know when to use them. And you know, with my training and my own kind of experience as a trainer and learning my own body and just watching stuff in videos, you start to learn when you start to get stuck, when you start to miss reps, when you find yourself getting really slow off the ground, when you find yourself just kind of getting thrown off and you just feel like the bar is getting too heavy. I find that's the best time to do block pulls and deficit deadlifts. Because I find that once you know, the thing is that block pulls and deficit deadlifts are not your competition lifts. So they are moving, even though they are making the exercise harder, they are moving you away from specificity. So this is something you would do much further out from meet versus the actual technique, which you'll do closer to a meet, right? For like a peaking cycle or whatever, or what people would call it. But, you know, the thing is that block pulls, I'll say rack pulls. Rack pulls help a way to kind of make you mentally, I guess that's what I'll say for confidence. If you're able to hold, let's say your max deadlift is 520, right? But you should be able to hold somewhere around like 540, maybe 550, right? You pull it off pins, 3 inches. That builds a ton of confidence. You know, it's, oh, I can hold that, so I should be able to pick that up off the ground. Not always the case, but it does help in the brain as far as the mental side. But again, on these last, I'm getting all over the place here, but sorry about that. But block pulls versus deficit deadlifts is that they say that you should use deficit deadlifts when you are finding yourself trouble breaking the ground. They say you should use block pulls when you're missing lockout. And I think that, because I've heard I remember Jeremy Hamilton said deficit deadlifts help your lockout and not block pulls. You know, and you know what I think is that you do both. You know, they're just a way to overload. You know, block pulls, deficit deadlifts make the range of motion longer. So you're having to essentially stay under tension for a longer period of time. You have to focus on becoming faster off the ground so that way you don't miss the lift. And they just help you kind of train your body to sort of keep pulling, you know, like, because one of the things I have a bad habit of sometimes is I'll stop pulling, or I don't really give it my all. Like I'll pull the bar off the ground, I'll deadlift it, but then what will happen is I won't finish the lift, or I'll stall, or I'll stop because usually lockout is pretty easy, you know, or I can lock out almost anything. But then the problem is you forget that at 95, 100%, and if you're fatigued or you're going for a PR, that's gonna go away. I mean, you're gonna have to grind that bitch up. If you haven't seen my previous video, or maybe I think I posted it, where I missed 573 during training, a lift I've made at a meet, and learning how to grind that, is sort of like, man, I'm losing my train of thought. But my point is that it just helps you finish the lift. It's like, I remember in golf or baseball or t-ball, really, I remember when I was a kid, the problem that I used to have was finishing through, like taking a full swing and finishing. And that's sort of what deficit deadlifts kind of do. They help you like over pull, right? Whereas block pulls allow you to overload and become faster. This is my experience. This is what I feel. Block pulls help you become faster. They make you, force you to stay tighter faster. They basically make you, because the truth is, in my opinion, for me, and maybe this is just me, but block pulls are hella hard. I find them the most difficult thing. You take my max, or maybe 90%, it would be easier for me to pick it off the ground than off blocks. It just is, because for whatever reason, I mean, my lower back, upper back is very strong, and I use that to kind of load and to rip it off the ground. Whereas off blocks, God, I don't even. It's like I have to be super fast, and I guess that's one of my things is I'm not really that fast of a person. I'm relatively slow, so block pulls will help with speed. Interesting enough, they say deficit deadlifts help you with speed off the ground, whereas block pulls just make you faster. Anyways, those are just some thoughts. Hope you liked the video. Click like if you liked it. If you got to the end, I do appreciate you watching the whole video. It means you were engaged and you liked the video. Click like if you haven't already. Thanks for watching. Share the video with someone if you know that they think they'll benefit with this, because I want to grow my subscriber base. And that's a wrap.